Sergeant Marcus Bell had faced down hardened criminals, navigated treacherous situations, and walked into danger more times than he could count. Through it all, he always knew he could rely on the unwavering presence at his side. Ragnar, his fiercely loyal, impeccably trained K9 German Shepherd. But on that brutally freezing night, during a high-risk narcotics operation that felt wrong from the start, reliance turned into desperate need. Marcus found himself bleeding out in the suffocating darkness of a filthy downtown alley, his life force draining with every agonizing second, the metallic taste of blood thick in his mouth. No backup was immediately in sight. His radio lay just out of reach, shattered, his voice too weak to call for help. There was only Ragnar, his magnificent German Shepherd partner, standing sentinel over him, warm breath misting in the frigid air, intelligent eyes burning with a fierce, protective determination that mirrored Marcus's own fading resolve. The mission, intended to dismantle a notoriously violent drug syndicate flooding the city with poison, had gone catastrophically sideways. An ambush, unforeseen variables, a hail of gunfire erupting from the shadows where intel had promised clear passage. Now Marcus was down, critically wounded, the icy tendrils of shock beginning to numb the searing pain. But Ragnar refused to yield. The bond between Handler and K9, forged through years of relentless training, shared dangers, and quiet companionship, transcended mere duty. It was primal, unbreakable. What the remarkable dog did next, driven by that bond and sheer instinct, would leave the entire seasoned police force utterly speechless and forever indebted. The wind, sharp as splintered glass, howled through the labyrinthine alleyways of the city's decaying industrial district, carrying the distant mournful echoes of sirens, a constant urban lullaby that usually faded into the background, but now sounded ominously far away. Sergeant Marcus Bell moved with practiced swiftness, each footfall measured and silent on the cracked pavement littered with debris. His heartbeat, usually a steady drum of professional calm, thudded unnervingly loud against his ribs, despite the years of training designed to manage adrenaline. Beside him, a powerful shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom. Ragnar, padding with wolf-like silence, his massive head held low, ears swiveling independently, sharp amber eyes methodically scanning every shadow, every recessed doorway, every pile of refuse that could conceal a threat. His wet nose constantly tested the air, deciphering the complex olfactory tapestry of the alley. Stale garbage, damp concrete, rat droppings, and the faint underlying chemical tang associated with the narcotics they were hunting. This was supposed to be a meticulously planned takedown, the culmination of weeks of intense surveillance targeting the leadership of the Serpent's Coil Gang. Intel suggested their lieutenant, a ruthless enforcer known only as Ghost, used this network of alleys for clandestine meetings. But something felt intrinsically wrong tonight. The usual pre-raid tension was amplified, twisted into a knot of cold premonition in Marcus's gut. The air felt too still, the silence too profound. Ragnar seemed to feel it too. A low, almost inaudible rumble vibrated deep in his chest, a subtle warning Marcus had learned to trust implicitly. Marcus's secure radio, clipped to his tactical vest, crackled to life, the dispatcher's voice tinny and distant. Unit 4, Sergeant Bell, do you have visual confirmation on the primary target location? He pressed the transmit button on his shoulder mic, keeping his voice low, trying to ignore the tremor of unease. Negative, dispatch. Environment is clear at approach point Alpha. Moving deeper into the network now. Visibility limited. He paused, listening intently to the oppressive silence. Feels quiet. Too quiet. Beside him, Ragnar let out another low growl, louder this time, his ears flattened against his skull, his body tensing like a coiled spring. The dog sensed it definitively now. Movement, hostility, danger, pinpointing a source Marcus couldn't yet perceive in the encompassing darkness. A fraction of a second later, the alley erupted. A blinding muzzle flash split the darkness from a high window overlooking their position, followed instantaneously by the deafening crack of a high-caliber rifle. Pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded in Marcus's chest. It felt like being hit by a speeding truck. The impact threw him backward violently, slamming him against the cold, unforgiving brick wall before he crumpled to the ground, the air driven from his lungs in a strangled gasp. His vision swam, blurring into confusing fractals of light and shadow. He'd been hit. Hard. Ragnar snapped into immediate, ferocious action. Training and instinct merged seamlessly. With a deafening roar of protective fury, the German Shepherd launched himself forward, not towards the unseen shooter, but planting himself firmly over Marcus's fallen form, a living shield of muscle and teeth. He barked savagely, a deep, continuous volley that echoed menacingly off the narrow brick walls, daring anyone lurking in the shadows to approach his downed handler. Marcus clawed his way back from the edge of unconsciousness, fighting the overwhelming urge to succumb to the encroaching darkness. His tactical vest had absorbed some of the kinetic energy, preventing immediate death. But the heavy round had found a gap, punching through flesh and muscle just below his ribs on the left side. A sickening warmth spread rapidly across his abdomen and down his leg. Blood, dark and viscous, seeped relentlessly through the fabric of his uniform, pooling beneath him on the grimy pavement. He fumbled weakly for his sidearm, his fingers numb and unresponsive, his grip strength non-existent. Keeping his gun steady was impossible. Just breathing required monumental effort. The radio crackled again, urgently this time. "Carter, report! Shots fired! Carter, what's your status? Unit 4, respond!" Static hissed in his earpiece. But Marcus couldn't respond. His hands trembled uncontrollably. His strength was hemorrhaging away almost as fast as his blood. The alley seemed to grow colder, darker, the silence pressing in, amplifying the sound of his own ragged, shallow breathing in the frantic thumping of his heart. He was fading. He knew it. Ragnar whined, a high-pitched sound of distress completely at odds with his ferocious barking moments before. He nudged Marcus's face insistently with his wet nose, then licked his cheek, sensing the life draining away, the urgency escalating with terrifying speed. The dog's incredible instinct, honed by training but rooted in something deeper, told him with absolute certainty that Marcus didn't have much time. Backup wasn't coming fast enough. The initial shots were likely suppressing fire, designed to isolate and eliminate. If Ragnar didn't act, didn't break protocol, didn't leave his handler's side, something unthinkable under normal circumstances, Marcus would die right here, alone in this cold, unforgiving alley. Ragnar made his decision. It wasn't a conscious thought process as humans understand it, but a primal imperative overriding years of ingrained training that screamed stay with the handler. Save Marcus. Find help. With one last, lingering glance at Marcus's paling face, a final reassuring lick to his unresponsive hand, the K9 German Shepherd spun around and bolted. He launched himself into the oppressive darkness, powerful legs churning, muscles bunched, a dark streak disappearing into the maze of alleys. His mission singular and desperate. Reach the station, find another officer, find anyone who could help save the man who was his partner, his world. The question hung heavy in the freezing air, unanswered. Would he possibly make it in time? Ragnar ran like the hounds of hell were at his heels. His powerful legs devoured the pavement, claws scrabbling for purchase on the slick, uneven surfaces. His breath came in short, sharp, determined bursts, misting white in the frigid night air. His mind, a focused laser of canine instinct and loyalty, held only one objective: saving Marcus. The biting cold air sliced into his thick double coat, chilling him to the bone. But he barely registered the discomfort. Every shadow held a potential threat, every echoing sound a distraction to be ignored. Every precious second that ticked by was a second closer to losing his handler, his pack leader, the center of his universe. The warren of downtown streets surrounding the industrial district was nearly deserted at this late hour, swallowed by an Cimmerian darkness broken only by the intermittent, sickly yellow glow of flickering streetlights. Warehouses loomed like sleeping giants, their windows dark, sightless eyes. Ragnar moved like a phantom, a blur of focused energy, effortlessly dodging overflowing trash bins, leaping over stagnant, icy puddles reflecting the meager light, and cutting through narrow, reeking connector alleys that served as shortcuts known only to him and Marcus from their patrols. His sensitive ears, capable of picking up frequencies far beyond human range, twitched constantly, analyzing every distant siren, every scuttling rodent, every gust of wind rattling loose corrugated iron. But nothing mattered except finding help. The scent of Marcus's blood, sharp and terrifying, was fading behind him, replaced by the cold, indifferent smells of the city night. He had to hurry. Then a lifeline, cutting through the confusing miasma of urban scents. Exhaust fumes, stale food, decay. A familiar, welcome scent signature hit his nostrils. Faint but unmistakable. Officer Liam O'Connell. Marcus's closest teammate, his backup, the other human Ragnar trusted implicitly. The dog's highly attuned nose caught O'Connell's presence nearby, perhaps only a block or two away, the scent carried on the swirling wind. Without a nanosecond of hesitation, Ragnar altered his trajectory, pivoting sharply and sprinting towards the source of the scent, his paws barely seeming to touch the ground. O'Connell had just stepped out of his idling patrol car, the standard-issue radio already in hand, checking in with dispatch, reporting his position as he prepared to provide peripheral containment for Marcus's operation. He was reviewing the schematic of the target area on his dash-mounted screen, a frown creasing his brow when chaos erupted beside him. A large, dark blur of fur and muscle materialized seemingly out of nowhere, lunging towards him not with aggression, but with desperate, focused intent. Ragnar! Whoa! What the? O'Connell staggered back, startled, as the dog's strong jaws clamped firmly but carefully onto the thick fabric of his uniform sleeve, tugging with surprising force, pulling him away from the car. Ragnar! Easy, boy! What's wrong? He recognized the canine instantly, his heart simultaneously leaping with relief at seeing the dog and plummeting with dread. Ragnar shouldn't be here. Not alone. Ragnar let out a low, urgent growl, his amber eyes burning with an intensity that O'Connell had never seen before, not even during high-stress takedowns. He barked once, a deep, commanding sound that brooked no argument, then pulled forcefully at O'Connell's arm again, whining insistently. O'Connell's extensive training and years of experience kicked in immediately. He had worked alongside Marcus and Ragnar for nearly 5 years, witnessing their incredible bond firsthand. He knew Ragnar's behaviors intimately. This wasn't excitement, it wasn't confusion, it wasn't aggression. This was a deliberate, desperate plea for help. Something was terribly wrong. His heart hammered against his ribs, cold fear gripping him. Where was Marcus? Show me, boy, O'Connell commanded, his voice tight with urgency. Take me to him. Where's Marcus? Ragnar immediately released his sleeve, spun around, and took off back into the darkness from which he'd emerged, glancing back once to ensure O'Connell was following. O'Connell didn't hesitate for a second. He keyed his radio as he broke into a dead sprint, his boots pounding on the pavement, trying desperately to keep up with the K9's incredible speed. Dispatch officer down. Repeat, officer down. Code 1033. Ragnar located me, handler missing, presumed injured. Requesting immediate EMS backup, heavy police presence. Last known vicinity, alley network west of Main and 14th. Ragnar is leading me now. The response from dispatch was immediate, sharp with concern but professional. Copy that, Unit 5. Officer down confirmed. EMS en route, ETA 3 minutes. All available units converging on your location. Proceed with extreme caution. Ragnar ran at full, explosive speed, O'Connell pushing himself to his absolute limit just to stay within sight of the rapidly moving dog. The canine German Shepherd's movements were swift, fluid, and unerringly precise, weaving through the bewildering maze of dark streets and alleys with navigational certainty. O'Connell's lungs burned, his legs screamed in protest, but he pushed onward, fear for Marcus overriding his physical limitations. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was likely only 90 seconds, Ragnar skidded to a halt at the mouth of a particularly narrow, lightless alley. He stood rigid, staring into the oppressive darkness, a low whine escaping him. O'Connell followed his gaze, his own breath catching in his throat, his stomach dropping like a stone. The metallic, unmistakable scent of fresh blood hit him first, thick and cloying in the cold air. Then his eyes adjusted, making out the scene. The ominously dark stains stark against the lighter concrete, debris scattered from a struggle and slumped against the far wall, a motionless figure clad in dark tactical gear. Marcus. "Jesus Christ, Marcus!" O'Connell choked out, raw fear momentarily paralyzing him before adrenaline surged again. He rushed forward, drawing his sidearm instinctively, scanning the rooftops and shadowy recesses before sliding onto his knees beside his partner, his friend. Marcus was barely conscious, his breath coming in shallow, alarmingly infrequent, painful gasps. His hand was pressed weakly against the bleeding wound below his ribs, a futile effort against the catastrophic blood loss. His face, usually tanned and rugged, was shockingly pale, almost translucent under the weak ambient light filtering from the street. His eyes were unfocused, clouded with pain and shock. "Marcus! Hey, stay with me, buddy! Stay with me!" O'Connell's voice was rough with emotion. He holstered his weapon and immediately pressed both his hands hard against the wound, trying desperately to apply pressure, to slow the torrential bleeding. The sticky warmth of Marcus's blood instantly seeped through his tactical gloves, a horrifyingly intimate contact. Ragnar whimpered again, circling them anxiously, his ears pinned back flat against his head in profound distress. The dog nosed Marcus's cheek urgently, then licked his face, a desperate attempt to rouse him, to urge him to stay awake, to fight. Marcus's lips moved, a faint tremor, the words barely audible, slurred by pain and weakness. "Ragnar, did he make it?" O'Connell swallowed hard against the lump constricting his throat. "Yeah, Marcus," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Yeah, buddy, he made it. He found me. He brought me straight to you. You hear me?" Ragnar let out another small, distressed whine, gently licking Marcus's face again, as if confirming O'Connell's words. A flicker of consciousness returned to Marcus's eyes. His lips curved into the faintest ghost of a smile. "Good boy." His eyes fluttered closed again, his body going limp. "No, no, no! Marcus, stay awake, damn it!" O'Connell shouted, giving his shoulder a gentle shake, careful not to aggravate the wound, but desperate to keep him tethered to consciousness. "Help's coming, Marcus. You hear those sirens? Just hold on. Hold on." The distant wail of sirens, a sound that had been a background drone minutes ago, now echoed urgently through the narrow streets, growing rapidly louder, closer. A beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. Suddenly Ragnar turned, his body instantly rigid, ears pricked forward, head cocked, body tense. He let out a deep warning rumble from his chest, positioning himself protectively between O'Connell and the alley entrance. Someone else was coming. Footsteps, heavy, hurried, echoed from the street. O'Connell immediately drew his gun again, his heart pounding anew, his eyes scanning the darkness, straining to see past the glare of the arriving emergency lights that began to strobe against the brick walls. Had the shooters circled back? Had the Serpent's Coil gang come back to finish the job, to eliminate witnesses? Ragnar moved definitively in front of the still unconscious Marcus, planting his feet firmly, standing his ground. His body was rigid, hackles raised along his spine, fur bristling. His deep chest rumbled with a low, menacing snarl, teeth bared slightly. He was a formidable, determined guardian, ready to defend his handler to the death. Then the footsteps grew closer, resolving into distinct shapes moving cautiously into the alley's mouth. Shadows flickered under the emergency lights. Ragnar's growl deepened, becoming more threatening. His claws scraped audibly against the pavement as his powerful muscles tensed, coiled, ready to launch an attack. "CPD, police, lower your weapons. It's us. Show us your hands," a familiar voice shouted, cutting through the tension. O'Connell exhaled sharply, the breath leaving him in a shaky rush of relief. Backup had arrived. Uniformed officers flooded the alley, weapons drawn but lowering them as they recognized O'Connell. Ragnar seemed to understand instantly. The tension flowed out of his body, his tail lowering slightly, the growl subsiding. But he didn't move an inch from Marcus's side. His protective duty wasn't over yet. Paramedics rushed in past the officers, carrying bulky medical bags and a backboard, their movements efficient and urgent. Their gloved hands were already reaching for Marcus, assessing the situation with trained eyes. "He's lost a significant amount of blood," O'Connell reported quickly, standing up carefully and stepping aside to give them room, wiping his bloody gloves on his pants uselessly. "Single gunshot wound, high caliber, lower left side, just below the vest." "Got it," one of the lead paramedics responded tersely, already cutting away Marcus's blood-soaked uniform. "Airways compromised, weak pulse. BP is crashing, starting fluids wide open. We need to stabilize and transport now." The medical team worked with practiced speed and precision. A thick pressure bandage was applied firmly to Marcus's wound, tourniquets considered then discarded, an IV line expertly inserted into his arm, oxygen mask fitted over his pale face. Marcus's body was carefully log-rolled onto a stretcher. He remained terrifyingly still, barely reacting to the intense activity around him. Ragnar whined loudly, a heartbreaking sound of distress, trying to jump up onto the moving stretcher, desperate to stay with his handler. "Easy, boy, easy." O'Connell placed a firm, reassuring hand on Ragnar's powerful back, restraining him gently. "He's going to be okay. They're helping him." One of the paramedics called into their radio, her voice urgent but controlled. "Patient is critical, GCS low, but temporarily stabilized. Transporting immediately to Metro General Trauma Center. ETA 5 minutes." Ragnar didn't move as they swiftly maneuvered the stretcher out of the narrow alley. He just stared intently after Marcus, his ears twitching nervously, his tail tucked low, his entire being radiating anxiety and loss. As they loaded Marcus into the waiting ambulance, Ragnar let out a long, mournful, heartbroken howl that seemed to tear through the cold night air. He had done his part. He had found help. He had saved his handler's life. But now, separated from Marcus, all he could do was wait, powerlessly, consumed by worry. The ambulance doors slammed shut, the sirens screamed back to life, painting the alley walls in frantic flashes of red and blue before the vehicle accelerated rapidly away, disappearing into the city's indifferent night. O'Connell knelt beside the still trembling K9, running a hand soothingly over Ragnar's thick fur, feeling the tension thrumming beneath. "You did good, boy," he murmured, his own voice thick with emotion. "You did damn good, better than good. You saved him." Ragnar blinked slowly, his massive chest rising and falling with slow, steady breaths as he gradually calmed, but his intelligent amber eyes never left the direction the ambulance had vanished. He wasn't just Sergeant Marcus Bell's partner. He was his shadow, his protector, his other half. And he wouldn't rest until Marcus was safe. He wouldn't leave his side again. The harsh, fluorescent hospital lights of the emergency room flickered erratically overhead as the stretcher carrying Sergeant Marcus Bell burst through the automated double doors. Marcus's face, starkly visible under the unforgiving lights, was a deathly pale mask, his breathing frighteningly shallow beneath the oxygen mask. The trauma team moved with choreographed urgency, a whirlwind of scrubs and focused intensity, shouting vitals, medical jargon, and curt instructions as they rushed him down the corridor toward the trauma bay and inevitable surgery. The air crackled with controlled chaos. Outside those forbidden doors in the sterile, echoing hallway, Ragnar paced relentlessly, a coiled spring of canine anxiety. His nails clicked rhythmically, insistently against the polished linoleum floor, a stark contrast to the muffled urgency within the ER. His intelligent eyes remained locked with unwavering intensity on the doors through which Marcus had disappeared. He didn't understand hospitals. He didn't understand the strange, sharp smells of disinfectant clashing with the underlying scent of fear and suffering. He didn't understand why he couldn't follow, why he was being kept from his handler's side. He had never willingly left Marcus's side before, except for that terrifying run through the darkness. And the separation now felt agonizingly wrong, a violation of the natural order of their partnership. Officer Liam O'Connell slumped onto a hard, unforgiving plastic chair in the desolate waiting area nearby, watching Ragnar's restless pacing with a heavy heart filled with concern. The German shepherd's powerful body was rigid with tension, muscles bunched, ears constantly flicking, analyzing every distant clang, every intercom announcement, every footstep that echoed down the long corridor. Every time a nurse or doctor hurried past, Ragnar's head would snap up, his amber eyes momentarily flaring with desperate, pleading hope. But none of them brought Marcus back. None of them could tell him if his handler was okay. "Easy, boy," O'Connell murmured again, reaching out a hand to stroke Ragnar's thick, coarse fur, offering what little comfort he could. "He's in good hands now. The best hands." Ragnar whined softly, a low rumble of distress deep in his chest, momentarily pausing his pacing to press his wet nose against the cold floor tiles, trying to pick up the faint, lingering scent of Marcus amidst the confusing olfactory cacophony of the hospital. The sharp, sterile smell of antiseptic burned his sensitive nostrils, overlaying the terrifyingly faint scent of Marcus's blood. Something deep inside him, a primal, protective instinct, twisted painfully. Marcus wasn't safe yet, not until Ragnar could see him, protect him again. Minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness, stretching into what felt like interminable hours. O'Connell made necessary calls to Captain Rostova, updating her on Marcus's critical condition, reassuring Marcus's worried sister, who lived out of state, fielding inquiries from concerned fellow officers. Through it all, Ragnar maintained his vigil, his pacing occasionally subsiding into tense stillness, but his focus never wavering from those ER doors. Finally, mercifully, the doors swung open. A surgeon, looking weary but focused, approached them, pulling down his surgical mask. O'Connell was on his feet instantly, Ragnar stiffening beside him. "Sergeant Bell is out of surgery," the doctor, whose badge read doctor. Ramirez announced, his voice calm but grave. "He's alive. The bullet did significant damage, tore through muscle, nicked the diaphragm, caused massive internal bleeding. We had to remove his spleen, but we stopped the bleeding, repaired what we could. He's stable for now. Critical, but stable. We're moving him to the intensive care unit." O'Connell exhaled a ragged breath of profound relief, the tension draining from him so suddenly he felt weak-kneed. "Thank God. Can we see him?" Dr. Ramirez hesitated, his gaze shifting pointedly toward the large, imposing German shepherd standing alertly beside O'Connell. "The ICU has strict visitation policies, officer, especially regarding animals." "The dog stays," O'Connell stated firmly, his tone leaving absolutely no room for argument or negotiation. He met the doctor's gaze squarely. "Ragnar is his partner, his K9 unit. More than that, he saved Sergeant Bell's life tonight. He won't leave this hospital until Marcus wakes up. We'll keep him calm. He won't be any trouble, but he stays." Dr. Ramirez sighed, clearly weighing hospital protocol against the extraordinary circumstances and the fierce determination in both the man's and the dog's eyes. He nodded slowly. "All right, given the situation, I'll make an exception, but keep him calm and out of the way of the staff. Understand?" "Understood. Thank you, Doctor." Ragnar didn't need permission or directions. As soon as O'Connell received the nod and turned towards the ICU wing, the K9 German shepherd bolted down the hallway, nose lifted high, effortlessly filtering through the hospital smells to lock onto the faint but distinct trail of his handler's scent, leading him towards Marcus. Inside the dimly lit, hushed ICU room, Marcus lay terrifyingly still and unconscious in the narrow bed, dwarfed by the array of blinking, beeping machines surrounding him. Tubes snaked from his body, connected to IV bags and monitors. An oxygen mask covered his nose and mouth, misting slightly with each slow, mechanically assisted breath. His chest rose and fell with a slow, measured rhythm. Too slow, too weak, O'Connell thought with a fresh wave of fear. Without hesitation, Ragnar approached the bed. With surprising gentleness for such a large animal, he jumped up, resting his massive front paws carefully on the edge of the mattress near Marcus's still arm. He sniffed meticulously along Marcus's hand, his arm, his shoulder, analyzing the changed scent signature. His handler smelled different, worryingly faint, fragile, overlaid with the alien sense of medicine and anesthetic. He let out a deep, low, mournful whine, a sound filled with confusion and worry. "Marcus," O'Connell said softly, pulling a chair close to the bedside, his voice thick with emotion. "You've got one hell of a stubborn partner here, you know that? Never seen anything like it." Ragnar didn't move, didn't respond to O'Connell's voice. He just lowered his heavy head slowly, carefully, onto Marcus's unmoving arm, his warm breath ghosting over the pale skin. His amber eyes, filled with unwavering loyalty, never left his handler's face, watching for any sign of life, any flicker of recognition. The rhythmic, monotonous beeping of the heart monitor filled the heavy silence of the room, a fragile soundtrack to their vigil. O'Connell leaned back in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, the adrenaline finally draining away, leaving behind bone-deep exhaustion and gnawing uncertainty. "Guess we're waiting now, huh, buddy?" he murmured to the stoic K9. Ragnar didn't respond. He just stayed there, an unmoving, vigilant statue of fur and loyalty, fused to his handler's side, waiting, watching, protecting, refusing to leave until Marcus came back to him. The rhythmic, metronomic beeping of the heart monitor became the anchor in the disorienting quiet of the dimly lit hospital room. Days bled into nights, marked only by the changing shifts of nurses and the occasional hushed consultation between doctors just outside the door. The sterile, pervasive scent of antiseptic and potent medications filled the air, a smell Ragnar was beginning to loathe, but he barely noticed anymore. His large, heavy paws remained firmly planted on the floor beside the hospital bed, though occasionally he would rest his massive head gently on the edge of the mattress, needing the physical connection to Marcus's unmoving form. The canine German Shepherd hadn't truly rested since the shooting, his watchful amber eyes constantly locked onto his handler's still, pale face. No. O'Connell became a fixture in the uncomfortable chair nearby, existing on lukewarm coffee from the hospital cafeteria and sheer willpower. The exhaustion was a physical weight on him, settling deep into his bones, but Ragnar's unwavering vigil was strangely inspiring, almost shaming. The dog, O'Connell observed with awe, had refused every offer of food, accepted only minimal water, and steadfastly refused to leave Marcus's side for any reason, even for brief walks outside. A compassionate nurse, Chloe, had tried coaxing him away just once, hoping to give him a break. Ragnar had responded with a low, guttural growl, not aggressive, not truly threatening, but an unmistakable warning. "I stay." He wouldn't abandon Marcus. Not now, not ever. O'Connell had chuckled tiredly then, shaking his head in admiration. "You're a damn good partner, Ragnar. The best." Ragnar had barely flicked an ear in acknowledgement, his entire focus, his entire being, centered on the man in the bed. He was waiting, watching, protecting, his loyalty absolute. Inside the profound darkness, the void of unconsciousness, Marcus drifted. It wasn't unpleasant exactly. There was no pain here, only an unnerving, profound silence. It felt like floating weightlessly in a vast, calm ocean with no waves, no sky, no horizon, just endless, peaceful oblivion. He could occasionally hear voices, muffled and distorted as if coming from a great distance underwater, but none of them were clear enough to penetrate the fog. None of them could reach him. It was tempting, almost seductive, to just let go, to sink deeper into the welcoming numbness. Then something familiar pierced the silence. Not a voice, but a sound. A low, deep, mournful whine, resonating with worry and unwavering presence. Ragnar. The name surfaced in his fragmented consciousness. He tried to move, to respond, to reach towards the sound, but his body felt like lead, utterly unresponsive, trapped within the suffocating void. The disembodied voices grew slightly louder now, more urgent perhaps, but he still couldn't decipher the words. He felt like he was sinking further, faster now, his tenuous grip on awareness slipping away. A memory, sudden and vivid, flashed behind his closed eyelids. Ragnar, a lanky, eager rookie K9, barely more than a year old, all gangly legs and boundless energy, staring up at him with intelligent, trusting brown eyes, waiting intently for his very first command during their initial bonding session. Marcus remembered reaching out, ruffling the thick fur behind his ears, feeling the immediate connection and smiling. "We're going to be the best damn team out there, buddy," he'd promised the young dog. Another memory surfaced, a freezing late-night patrol, steam rising from sewer grates, the city streets eerily empty and silent. Ragnar trotting silently, confidently beside him, ever vigilant, his senses reaching out into the darkness, a silent guardian. And then, the first time Ragnar had unequivocally saved his life, years ago, a routine traffic stop gone bad, a suspect suddenly pulling a concealed knife. Before Marcus could even react, Ragnar had exploded into action, taking the assailant down with controlled force, neutralizing the threat scant inches before the blade could find its mark. Ragnar standing over the subdued suspect, looking back at Marcus with fierce loyalty. And then the alley, the sudden blinding flash, the deafening roar, excruciating pain, cold concrete, spreading warmth of blood, suffocating darkness closing in. A sharp whimper, closer this time, insistent, pulled him back from the brink, from the memory, from the void. Ragnar. He was here, waiting. Marcus tried again, summoning strength from some hidden reserve. He fought against the crushing weight, the heavy sedation, pushing fiercely through the thick, disorienting fog clouding his mind. He wasn't alone. Ragnar was waiting for him. He had to get back. With a monumental surge of will, a conscious decision to fight, Marcus forced his heavy eyelids open. The room swam into blurry focus. Harsh light stabbed at his eyes. O'Connell, who had been slumped in the chair, half dozing, nearly dropped his coffee cup. Ragnar's head shot up instantly, his ears pricked forward, his body quivering with sudden, intense alertness as Marcus's fingers twitched almost imperceptibly against the white hospital sheet. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor abruptly changed its cadence, accelerating slightly. Marcus's breathing pattern shifted, becoming less mechanical, more self-initiated. O'Connell was on his feet in an instant, leaning over the bed, his voice urgent but hopeful. "Marcus! Hey, Marcus! Can you hear me, buddy? Open your eyes." Marcus's eyelids fluttered again, struggling against the weight. His throat moved convulsively as he swallowed, the dryness painful. His chest rose and fell in a slow, but discernibly deeper, steadier breath. Ragnar let out a sharp, high-pitched, ecstatic bark, a sound completely unlike his usual controlled vocalizations. It was pure, unadulterated joy and relief. Marcus's lips, chapped and dry, barely moved, but the whisper, hoarse and weak, was unmistakable. "Ragnar!" O'Connell exhaled a shaky, relieved laugh, clapping his hand softly on Marcus's shoulder. "Damn right, Ragnar, buddy. He never left your side. Not for 1 second." Ragnar nudged Marcus's arm gently with his nose, his tail giving the slightest tentative wag. "He knows me. He's back. His handler was alive, conscious." Marcus blinked, his vision slowly clearing, focusing on the beloved furry face hovering near him. His voice was a rough, grating rasp, barely audible. "Saved me? Again? Huh, buddy?" Ragnar responded with a gentle lick to his hand, a gesture of profound affection and relief. O'Connell smirked, relief making him giddy. "Yeah, he did it, and dragged my sorry ass through half the damn city in the dark to do it. The stubborn hero." Marcus managed the smallest chuckle, a weak, breathy sound, but it was the sound of life, of returning vitality. He turned his head just slightly on the pillow, his gaze meeting Ragnar's steady amber eyes. The unbreakable bond between them, forged in shared danger and quiet loyalty, transcended the need for words. Ragnar had done the impossible. He had pulled Marcus back from the precipice. He had refused to let him go. Over the next few days, Marcus began the slow, arduous process of regaining his strength. The bullet, Dr. Ramirez explained, had torn through significant muscle tissue, grazed his diaphragm, and necessitated the removal of his spleen due to massive hemorrhaging. It was, the doctor reiterated with a shake of his head, a genuine miracle he had survived the initial blood loss and the subsequent complex surgery. Marcus, however, had a different perspective. It wasn't a miracle, it was Ragnar. The German shepherd, true to O'Connell's promise, never left his side. Not even when Marcus was eventually moved from the sterile intensity of the ICU to a private recovery room down the hall. Ragnar claimed the worn armchair in the corner as his own, though he spent most of his time lying on the cool tile floor as close to Marcus's bed as possible, a constant, reassuring presence. Officers from the precinct, including a visibly relieved Captain Rostova, came to visit in shifts, bringing awkward flowers, precinct gossip, and offers of support. But it was Ragnar's quiet, unwavering companionship that kept Marcus grounded, anchoring him against the waves of pain, medication-induced haze, and the darker psychological currents stirring beneath the surface. One particularly long night, when sleep refused to come, Marcus lay awake, staring blankly at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling. The sharp, acute pain from the surgery had largely faded, replaced by a deep, throbbing ache in his side and a profound weariness that seemed bone-deep. But something heavier, less tangible, lingered inside him, a cold knot of guilt and self-recrimination. "I should have seen it coming," he murmured into the quiet darkness of the room. Ragnar instantly lifted his noble head at the sound of Marcus's troubled voice, his ears swiveling forward attentively. O'Connell, who had been half dozing in the visitor's chair, having refused to leave Marcus alone for the first few nights after he regained consciousness, opened his eyes and raised an eyebrow. "Seen what coming?" Marcus exhaled heavily, the sound rattling slightly in his chest. His jaw tightened. The shooter, the ambush, the setup felt wrong from the start. "I should have trusted my gut, trusted Ragnar's warning sooner. I let my guard down, got complacent." O'Connell sat forward, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, his expression serious. "Marcus, don't do that to yourself. That's survivor's guilt talking. You're one of the best, most cautious officers I know. It was a well-planned ambush, designed to take you out. And Ragnar, he knew. Somehow he knew. And he got to you. He got to me. In time. That's what matters." Marcus looked down at Ragnar, who had risen and padded silently to the bedside, resting his chin on the mattress, looking up at him with those soulful, intelligent eyes. Marcus ran a hand slowly over the dog's thick fur, feeling the familiar texture, the warmth, the solid presence. "Yeah," he conceded softly. "Yeah, he did." Ragnar leaned into the touch, letting out a soft sigh, his warm brown eyes never leaving Marcus's face, seeming to absorb the lingering guilt and pain. "Don't make this your fault, Marcus," O'Connell insisted quietly but firmly. "You're here. You survived. You made it. And Ragnar..." He managed a small smirk, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, buddy, I think he just earned himself Officer of the Year. Maybe Dog of the Century." Marcus chuckled softly, a genuine sound this time. "Damn right he did. Both counts." Ragnar responded with a definite, if slight, wag of his tail. His handler was talking, sounding more like himself. That was good. The hospital room, though private, felt confining. The steady, monotonous beeping of the replacement heart monitor, tethered to Marcus's finger, was a constant reminder of his fragility. The occasional rustle of the stiff hospital blanket as Sergeant Marcus Bell shifted restlessly in bed punctuated the quiet. It had been 3 days since he'd woken up, regaining full consciousness, and though the doctors assured him the worst was definitively over, the pain, a deep, persistent ache in his side, remained a constant companion. Perhaps worse, though, was the mental echo of the trauma, the feeling of vulnerability that clung to him like a shroud. Ragnar remained a steadfast shadow, rarely leaving the room even when O'Connell or the nurses insisted. The K9 German Shepherd barely seemed to sleep, his senses perpetually on high alert, always keeping a watchful, protective eye on his handler. It was uncanny, Marcus thought, as if the dog instinctively knew that Marcus was still fighting a silent battle within himself, grappling with the psychological aftermath of nearly dying alone in that alley. Now, O'Connell leaned against the doorframe later that morning, nursing yet another cup of notoriously stale hospital coffee. His own exhaustion was palpable, etched in the dark circles under his eyes, but his relief at Marcus's survival was immense. He studied his friend, then glanced at the ever-vigilant dog. "You still look like hell, Bell," O'Connell observed bluntly, but with underlying affection. Marcus managed a weak smirk. "Feel worse, O'Connell. Way worse." O'Connell sighed, stepping fully into the room. "The precinct's been buzzing. Everyone's asking about you, and they're ready to throw a damn ticker tape parade for Ragnar here." He motioned toward the dog, whose ears predictably perked at the sound of his name. Captain Rostova mentioned they're officially putting him in for the department's Medal of Valor, highest honor for a K9. Marcus reached out a hand, slowly scratching behind Ragnar's receptive ears. The big dog let out a soft huff of contentment, but didn't move from his sentinel post beside the bed. "He doesn't care about awards or medals," Marcus murmured, his voice still hoarse. "He just cares that I'm still breathing, that we're together." O'Connell sat down heavily in the visitor's chair, running a weary hand over his face. "Yeah, well, we all do, man. We all do." The genuine weight in his friend's voice made Marcus pause. O'Connell had been there that night. He had seen the blood-soaked alley, witnessed the frantic efforts of the paramedics, felt the chilling fear as Marcus's life had almost slipped away. Marcus took a slow breath, bracing himself. "How bad was it, Liam?" "Really?" O'Connell hesitated, his gaze dropping for a moment before meeting Marcus's squarely. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his voice low and serious. "The paramedics said, if Ragnar hadn't gotten to me exactly when he did, if we'd been maybe 2-3 minutes later finding you, you wouldn't be here, Marcus. Flat out. You were bleeding out too fast." The stark, unvarnished truth hit Marcus like a physical blow, harder than any bullet. He'd known it intellectually, of course, pieced it together from fragmented memories and doctors' explanations. But hearing it stated so plainly by O'Connell, the man who found him, made it terrifyingly real. He owed his life, quite literally, to his canine partner's impossible feat of instinct, loyalty, and speed. That night, sleep remained elusive. Marcus lay awake long after the sedative kicked in, staring blankly at the darkened ceiling. The painkillers managed to dull the persistent ache in his ribs to a tolerable level, but nothing could quiet the relentless storm raging in his mind. He kept replaying the moments in the alley, over and over, a torturous loop. The muzzle flash, the impact, the suffocating darkness, the horrifying feeling of utter helplessness as his life drained away onto the cold, grimy pavement. Ragnar, as if sensing his handler's escalating distress, lifted his heavy head from where he rested on the floor beside the bed. He whined softly, then rose silently, and rested his chin gently on the edge of the mattress. His warm, intelligent brown eyes locked onto Marcus's, filled with an empathy and understanding that transcended species, that no human words could adequately express. "You knew, didn't you?" Marcus murmured, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out a trembling hand, running his fingers through Ragnar's thick, familiar fur, drawing comfort from the simple tactile connection. "Back in the alley. You felt it before I did. You tried to warn me." Ragnar didn't move, didn't pull away, just let out another quiet, sympathetic whine. Marcus exhaled slowly, the breath catching in his throat. I should have listened to you, buddy. Should have trusted your instincts over the intel. Ragnar nudged his hand gently with his muzzle, as if trying to physically push away the heavy burden of guilt he sensed radiating from Marcus. Marcus managed a small, watery chuckle. You really don't let me sulk for long, do you, pal? Ragnar licked his hand once, a quick, reassuring gesture, then rested his head back on Marcus's arm, a warm, solid weight of unwavering support. O'Connell had told him not to blame himself. Captain Rostova had echoed the sentiment during her visit. The rational, experienced police officer side of Marcus agreed. Ambushes happened. Intel could be flawed. It wasn't his fault. But the part of him that remembered lying helpless on the cold pavement, bleeding out, struggling desperately for each ragged breath while his partner stood guard, that part wasn't so easily convinced. The trauma ran deep. The next morning, Dr. Ramirez came in for her rounds, accompanied by Nurse Chloe. Your vital signs are excellent, Sergeant Bell. The surgical site is healing cleanly. No signs of infection, Dr. Ramirez announced, flipping briskly through his chart with professional detachment. Physical therapy will start this afternoon to get you moving, prevent atrophy. If everything continues improving at this rate, you might be able to be discharged in another few days, maybe a week. Marcus nodded absently, his mind already elsewhere. Discharge felt like a distant concept. The moment the doctor and nurse left, he turned to O'Connell, who had just walked in with 2 cups of fresh, hopefully less stale coffee. I need to get back out there, Liam, Marcus stated abruptly, his voice infused with a sudden, restless urgency. O'Connell blinked, startled by the sudden intensity. Back out where? What are you talking about? On duty. I need to get back on duty as soon as I'm cleared, Marcus clarified, his jaw set with determination. O'Connell let out a short, dry, incredulous laugh. Marcus, you were shot, nearly fatally, less than a week ago. You had major surgery. You need to rest, recover properly. Marcus shook his head stubbornly, ignoring the twinge in his side. I can't just sit here, Liam, rotting in this bed, thinking, the longer I'm away, the harder it'll be to go back. I need to get back to the routine, back to the street, back with Ragnar. O'Connell studied him for a long, searching moment, seeing the familiar stubbornness, but also the underlying anxiety in his friend's eyes. He sighed, recognizing the futility of arguing. Okay, I get it. I do. But don't rush this, man, seriously. Your body needs time to heal properly. You push too hard, too soon, you'll just end up back here or worse. Marcus glanced down at Ragnar, who was watching the exchange intently, head cocked. So does my head, Marcus admitted quietly. Being idle isn't helping. O'Connell didn't argue further. He understood the mindset, the need for purpose, the fear of letting the trauma win. He just handed Marcus one of the coffees and sat down in the chair beside him, settling in for another day of quiet support. Ragnar let out a deep, contented breath, seeming to sense a resolution, and curled up protectively on the floor at Marcus's side. He wasn't just Marcus's partner. He was his guardian, his anchor, and when the time came, when Marcus was truly ready, Ragnar would be there, steadfast and ready to stand by his side once more, facing whatever came next, together. Sergeant Marcus Bell sat gingerly on the edge of his hospital bed, the thin fabric of the standard-issue gown doing little to ward off the room's cool air. He rolled his shoulders slowly, deliberately, testing the range of motion, feeling the familiar landscape of his own body with a newfound, cautious awareness. The internal stitches still pulled uncomfortably at his skin with certain movements, a constant, sharp reminder of the violation. But the overwhelming, debilitating pain had finally dulled into something more manageable, a persistent, deep ache rather than agony. Dr. Ramirez had been cautiously optimistic, stating he needed at least another full week of rest and dedicated physical therapy before even considering light administrative duties, let alone returning to the field. But Marcus, a man defined by action and purpose, had never been good at sitting still, at being passive. Idleness felt like rust setting in. Ragnar sat attentively on the floor directly in front of him, a statue of canine focus. His deep brown eyes, intelligent and perceptive, watched Marcus's every subtle movement with the same laser-sharp intensity he applied during a building search or suspect tracking. He seemed to sense the shift in his handler, the nascent stirring of intent. Ragnar knew, with the certainty of their shared bond, that something was about to happen. Marcus was getting ready. O'Connell stood leaning casually against the door jamb, arms crossed over his chest, observing the scene with a mixture of concern and understanding. "You absolutely sure you want to try this today, Marcus? Physical therapy isn't scheduled till this afternoon." Marcus glanced up at his friend, his expression resolute. "I have to, Liam. Need to know I still can." With a deep, deliberate breath that made his ribs twinge, he pressed the soles of his bare feet firmly onto the cold, smooth tile floor and pushed himself slowly, carefully, to a standing position. The moment he wobbled, the room tilting slightly as dizziness washed over him from the sudden change in posture and prolonged bed rest, Ragnar was there. Instantly. The dog pressed his sturdy, muscular body firmly against Marcus's trembling left leg, offering silent, solid support, a living crutch of unwavering loyalty. Marcus instinctively reached down, his hand gripping the thick, coarse fur at Ragnar's powerful neck, grounding himself, drawing strength from his partner's steadfast presence. O'Connell watched the seamless exchange, a small, knowing smile touching his lips as he shook his head slightly. "You two really are something else. You know that?" Marcus managed a faint smirk, still steadying himself. "Yeah, well, he's stubborn. Doesn't like seeing me unsteady." Ragnar let out a soft huff, nudging Marcus's hand gently, as if agreeing with the assessment. The first few steps were tentative, agonizingly slow. Marcus felt every minute shift in his recovering body, every protesting muscle, every lingering ache amplified. His balance felt precarious, but Ragnar walked precisely beside him, perfectly in sync, shoulder pressed lightly against his thigh, anticipating his needs, adjusting his own pace flawlessly, just like they always did on patrol, handler and K9 moving as one integrated unit. This wasn't just about testing his physical recovery, it was a profound step in rebuilding trust. Trust in his own body's ability to heal, trust that he could overcome the vulnerability that had haunted him since the shooting. The last time Marcus had been fully on his own feet, he had been bleeding out, helpless in a dark, indifferent alley. The last time he had walked under his own power, it had nearly been his very last walk. Now each slow, deliberate step forward felt like a silent affirmation, a reclamation, a promise to himself and to his partner. "We're coming back." When they reached the room door, O'Connell held it open, his expression carefully neutral, hiding his concern. "All right then, you ready to brave the bustling metropolis of the hospital corridor again?" he quipped lightly. Marcus inhaled slowly, gathering his resolve. "Yeah," he said, his voice stronger now. "Let's do this." Ragnar stepped out into the hallway first, his head held high, ears alert, tail held in a steady, neutral position. His handler was walking, moving forward. That signified only one thing to the loyal K9. Soon, very soon, they would be back where they truly belonged, out on the streets, working together, side by side. Sergeant Marcus Bell took his first tentative steps outside the sterile confines of the hospital building, blinking as the unfiltered afternoon sunlight hit his face. He inhaled deeply, feeling the crisp, cool city air fill his lungs, a welcome contrast to the recycled antiseptic air inside. It wasn't the biting, malevolent cold of the night he had been shot, but the slight chill in the air still sent an involuntary shiver, a phantom reminder, through his recovering body. Ragnar stayed glued to his side, a constant, reassuring pressure against Marcus's leg. The German Shepherd moved with fluid precision, his gait perfectly mirroring Marcus's slower, more deliberate pace. The dog was far more than just a highly trained service animal. He was Marcus's anchor, his confidant, his furry, four-legged soulmate. Every step Marcus took, Ragnar matched it, instantly adjusting, instinctively ready to steady him, physically and emotionally, if needed. O'Connell walked protectively on Marcus's other side, his eyes constantly scanning his friend, assessing his color, his breathing, ready to intervene at the slightest sign of distress. "You absolutely sure about this, man? We can just sit on the bench for a bit." Marcus let out a slow, controlled breath, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. "I need this, Liam. Need to feel normal again, even for just a few minutes." Normal? That word felt incredibly distant, almost alien after the crucible of the past weeks. The trauma ran deeper than the physical wound. He wasn't just recovering from a near-fatal gunshot. He was recovering from the visceral, terrifying feeling of absolute helplessness. Lying broken and bleeding in that filthy alley, unable to move, unable to defend himself, unable even to call for help, had shaken something fundamental deep inside him. He, Sergeant Marcus Bell, the experienced officer, the K-9 handler, the one always in control, always protecting others, had been rendered utterly powerless, completely dependent on his K-9 partner's improbable heroism. If not for Ragnar, the thought was still unbearable. As if sensing the dark trajectory of Marcus's thoughts, Ragnar nudged his hand gently with his wet nose, a familiar gesture that always managed to pull Marcus out of his own head, grounding him in the present moment. O'Connell sighed, relenting. All right. Let's just take it slow then. No sudden movements, no trying to sprint after squirrels, and if you feel like you're going to fall or get dizzy, you tell me immediately. Got it?" "I know," Marcus interrupted, a ghost of his old confidence returning. He glanced down at his partner. "Ragnar's got me covered." O'Connell smirked, conceding the point. "Damn right he does. Best backup partner on the force." They walked slowly down the hospital's wide front steps, moving deliberately toward the visitor parking lot. Marcus's assigned squad car, scarred but repaired, after being processed as part of the crime scene following the shooting, had been brought over by O'Connell earlier that morning. Marcus was determined to get back into it, to reclaim that familiar space, even though he wouldn't be cleared for active duty for weeks, maybe months. It was a symbolic step, a necessary one. When they reached the vehicle, Marcus stopped, his breath catching slightly. His own reflection stared back at him from the tinted driver's side window. He looked different, thinner, paler, definitely tired, the lines around his eyes etched deeper. Changed. The trauma had left its mark, visible and invisible. Ragnar sat patiently, calmly at his side, waiting, watching his handler with unwavering focus. O'Connell watched him carefully, sensing the internal struggle. "Marcus, you don't have to push this today. We can come back tomorrow." Marcus gripped the cool metal of the door handle, his knuckles white for a moment. "Number I do." With another deep breath to steady himself, he pulled the door open. The familiar, comforting scent of the car interior. Worn leather, stale coffee, disinfectant wipes, and the underlying pervasive scent of Ragnar's fur greeted him like an old friend. He hesitated only for a fraction of a second, bracing against the expected protest from his healing ribs, before he carefully slid into the driver's seat. His side screamed in protest, the stitches pulling sharply, but he gritted his teeth and ignored it, settling into the worn contours of the seat. Instinctively, Ragnar leaped gracefully into the passenger seat, his usual spot, turning to look at Marcus expectantly, and for the first time since the horrifying night of the shooting, sitting there in the familiar confines of their mobile office. With his partner beside him, Marcus felt a flicker of his old self return, a spark of normalcy in the overwhelming chaos of recovery. His hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, fingers tracing the familiar grooves worn smooth by years of use. O'Connell leaned against the open door frame, a supportive but watchful presence. "Just so we're clear, you're definitely not driving anywhere yet, Bell." Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. "Wouldn't dream of it, O'Connell. I know the rules." Ragnar let out a soft huff from the passenger seat, as if emphatically agreeing with O'Connell. They sat in comfortable silence for a long moment, The sounds of the city muted through the closed windows. Marcus closed his eyes, just breathing, listening to the familiar rhythmic sound of Ragnar breathing steadily beside him. It was profoundly grounding. It reminded him vividly of countless late-night patrols, tedious stakeouts fueled by caffeine and bad jokes, adrenaline-fueled foot chases through darkened streets. Every single memory featuring Ragnar right there, an unwavering presence, never leaving his side, his partner, his constant. O'Connell gently tapped the roof of the car, breaking the reverie. All right, therapy session's over. You got your symbolic moment. Let's get you back inside before Dr. Ramirez comes looking for you and chews my ass out for letting her star patient escape. Marcus opened his eyes, a small genuine smile touching his lips. He nodded. Yeah. Okay. Slowly, carefully, bracing himself, he eased himself out of the car. Ragnar jumped out right after him, instantly resuming his position at Marcus's side, keeping perfect pace as Marcus made his way steadily back toward the imposing hospital entrance. He still had a long road ahead before he could officially return to duty, weeks of physical therapy and psychological hurdles to overcome. But this small victory felt significant. It was the first real step back towards the life he knew, the job he loved, the partnership that defined him. As they re-entered the hospital lobby, navigating the mid-afternoon bustle, a few nurses and staff members stopped their conversations to watch them pass. Some of them recognized Marcus immediately. They had been on duty the night he was brought in, unconscious, code blue imminent, clinging precariously to life. Seeing him walking now, albeit slowly, with his magnificent K9 partner faithfully at his side, brought murmurs of approval and relieved smiles. One of them, a young, friendly nurse named Chloe, whom Marcus recognized from his floor, stepped forward hesitantly. "Sergeant Bell, it's really good to see you up and moving around like this. You're looking much better." Marcus offered a small, appreciative nod. "Feels good to be moving, Chloe." "Thanks." Chloe smiled down warmly at Ragnar, who sat stoically beside Marcus. "And you, Ragnar," she said softly, her voice filled with admiration. "You're quite the celebrity around here now, you know that? Everyone's heard your story." Ragnar responded with a single polite wag of his tail, but maintained his usual serious, professional expression, his focus entirely on Marcus. Chloe chuckled softly. "I guess you don't let fame get to your head, huh, big fella?" O'Connell grinned. "Nah, he's too professional for that Hollywood nonsense. All business, this one." They continued down the wide corridor, making their way back towards Marcus's recovery room. But just as Marcus was about to step inside, a figure approaching purposefully down the hall made him pause and automatically straighten his posture, despite the pain it caused. Captain Eva Rostova. Captain Rostova was a seasoned, highly respected officer, one of the few women to have risen to her rank in the department's history. Her face, framed by short-cropped, no-nonsense dark hair, was lined with the indelible marks of years of hard work, bureaucratic battles, and the unrelenting stress of command. She had been on the force long before Marcus joined, and her sharp intelligence and commanding presence demanded respect. Marcus instinctively stood a little taller, years of training kicking in. "Captain?" Captain Rostova stopped before him, her sharp, analytical eyes studying him intently for a moment, assessing his condition with a practiced gaze. Then she glanced down at Ragnar, who sat alertly at Marcus's side. "O'Connell told me you've been up and walking, Bell." "Good to see." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied formally. The captain nodded curtly, a hint of approval in her eyes. "Good, because as soon as Dr. Ramirez clears you medically, and not a moment before, understand? I want you and Ragnar back on active duty." Marcus blinked, surprised. He had expected weeks, maybe months of mandatory desk duty, processing reports, standard procedure after a critical incident, especially a shooting. You're not putting me on restricted or desk duty first, Captain." Captain Rostova actually scoffed, a rare crack in her usually stern demeanor. "Bell, I know you. If I stick you behind a desk for more than a week, You'll go stir crazy and probably try to dismantle the precinct's computer network out of sheer boredom. You belong in the field, especially with him." She gave a significant nod toward Ragnar. "The department needs experienced handlers like you, officers who understand the street. And frankly, Ragnar's already proven this past week he's worth more than half the damn human officers on the force combined." O'Connell, standing beside Marcus, smirked. "I'd argue more than half, Captain." Rostova shot him a quelling glance but ignored the comment. "I won't rush your recovery, Bell. Take the time you need. Complete your physical therapy. Get your head right. But when you are ready, your spot, your unit, your partner, they're waiting for you." Marcus felt a profound wave of relief wash over him, an easing of a tension in his chest he hadn't fully realized he was carrying. He hadn't anticipated how much he had needed to hear that validation, that trust from his commanding officer. "Thank you, Captain," he said sincerely, his voice regaining some of its old strength. "That means a lot." Rostova gave him another curt nod, her gaze softening almost imperceptibly for a fraction of a second before turning to leave. Just before she stepped away, however, she paused and added, seemingly as an afterthought, "Oh, and Bell." "Yes, Captain. You might want to make sure your dress uniform is clean when you get back. Apparently the mayor's office has been calling. They're arranging some kind of official ceremony. Seems Ragnar is getting a rather significant medal for bravery." O'Connell let out a low, impressed whistle. "Damn, you hear that, boy? Official heroics. You're getting a big award from the city." Ragnar wagged his tail slightly again, acknowledging the positive tone, but his intelligent amber eyes never left Marcus's face. Awards and ceremonies meant nothing to him. His reward was here, standing beside him, healing. The captain departed, leaving a palpable sense of purpose in the air. O'Connell turned to Marcus, grinning widely now. "Well, looks like you're not the only certified hero in this partnership anymore, Bell." Marcus exhaled slowly, a genuine smile finally reaching his eyes as he reached down, rubbing Ragnar's head affectionately. "Nah," he murmured, his voice filled with deep emotion. "He always was the hero, Liam. Always." Ragnar leaned into the familiar, beloved touch, his warm brown eyes filled with something deeper than loyalty, more profound than training, a silent, unbreakable understanding. Marcus wasn't fully healed yet, physically or mentally. He still had a long, challenging road ahead. But one thing was absolutely certain. When he was finally ready, truly ready, Ragnar would be right there, leading the way, ready to step back into the demanding, dangerous world they navigated together. Partners, protectors, heroes, side by side. The days following Marcus's tentative walk outside the hospital passed in a slow, deliberate rhythm, each one marked by small but significant steps forward in his recovery. The sterile quiet of the hospital room was regularly punctuated by the determined grunts and controlled breathing of physical therapy sessions. Marcus pushed himself relentlessly, driven by Captain Rostova's promise and his own deep-seated need to return to the life, the purpose that defined him. His physical therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Maria, praised his determination but constantly cautioned him against overdoing it. "Healing takes time, Sergeant," she'd remind him sternly after a particularly grueling session working on core strength and mobility. "Your body went through hell. Respect the process." Through it all, Ragnar remained his constant shadow, his furry therapist. The German shepherd seemed to instinctively understand the boundaries of the therapy sessions, lying quietly on his designated mat in the corner of the room, watching Marcus's struggles with patient intensity. But the moment Marcus faltered, the instant a grimace of pain crossed his face, Ragnar would be alert, sometimes letting out a low whine of concern, other times simply meeting Marcus's gaze with those steady, reassuring eyes, offering silent encouragement that often meant more than any human words could. The hospital staff had largely stopped treating Marcus like a fragile patient who had cheated death. He was Sergeant Bell again, the tough K9 cop. They still marveled at Ragnar's devotion, often stopping by just to offer the dog a quiet scratch behind the ears, which he now accepted with stoic tolerance, or to share stories they'd heard about his bravery. Nurse Chloe made sure Ragnar always had fresh water and occasionally snuck him approved treats, earning herself a rare tail wag. But no one, not the doctors, not the nurses, not even O'Connell during his daily visits, watched Marcus more closely or understood his fluctuating moods better than Ragnar. The dog sensed the lingering shadows of the trauma. The nights Marcus woke up in a cold sweat from nightmares he couldn't fully recall. The moments his gaze would turn distant, lost in the terrifying replay of the alley. During those times, Ragnar would abandon his mat, pressing close, resting his heavy head on Marcus's lap, or nudging his hand until the connection broke through the darkness. O'Connell remained a vital lifeline to the outside world, showing up every morning like clockwork, armed with mediocre coffee and crucial updates from the precinct. The internal investigation into the botched raid and ambush was ongoing, standard procedure. More satisfyingly, the hunt for the Serpent's Coil members responsible for the shooting was yielding results. 2 suspects had been apprehended after intense detective work, and intel suggested the primary shooter, the elusive Ghost, was feeling the pressure, making mistakes. "You should see the press coverage on Ragnar," O'Connell had said one afternoon, scrolling through news feeds on his phone, showing Marcus headlines that bordered on sensational. "Hero K9 saves partner's life. Zrenya, the dog who ran through bullets. Zrenya, meet Ragnar, the city's furriest hero. Everyone wants an interview. With the dog, mostly," he added with a grin. Marcus had chuckled, glancing down at Ragnar, who was dozing lightly at his feet. "You ready for your close-up, big fella? Going Hollywood on me?" Ragnar had simply opened one eye, blinked slowly, and closed it again, utterly unimpressed. Fame held no interest for him. Only Marcus did. His world revolved around his handler's well-being. Finally, after nearly 2 weeks of intensive inpatient recovery and physical therapy, the day Marcus had been waiting for arrived. Dr. Ramirez entered his room, chart in hand, a rare smile on her face. "Well, Sergeant Bell, your progress has been remarkable. Faster than anticipated, honestly. You're healing exceptionally well." She flipped a page on the chart. "You'll still need ongoing outpatient physical therapy for several weeks, maybe months, to regain full strength and mobility. And I absolutely do not want you straining yourself or returning to strenuous duty prematurely. But," she paused for effect, "you're officially cleared to go home today." Home. The word resonated deep within Marcus's chest, a complex mixture of profound relief, eager anticipation, and a strange, unsettling unfamiliarity. He hadn't been home, truly home, since the night of the shooting. It felt like a lifetime ago. The hospital had become a strange sort of limbo, a sterile bubble separating him from his real life. O'Connell, who had timed his visit perfectly, clapped Marcus enthusiastically on the shoulder. "Hear that? Freedom. Guess that officially makes me your chauffeur today then." Marcus smirked, the expression feeling more natural now. "Definitely better than taking a cab, O'Connell. Wouldn't trust anyone else with the getaway driving." Ragnar's ears perked instantly at the shift in mood, the undercurrent of finality in the conversation. He rose to his feet, shaking himself slightly, his tail giving a tentative thump against the bed frame. He could feel it. His handler was leaving this strange place of sickness and worry. They were going home. The drive back across the city was quieter than Marcus had expected. The familiar urban landscape slid past the passenger window. Bustling streets, towering buildings, familiar landmarks. But Marcus observed it all with a sense of detachment, the weight of the past weeks settling heavily over him. He had nearly died. The thought was no longer abstract. It was a visceral reality humming just beneath his skin. If Ragnar hadn't possessed the intelligence and sheer willpower to break protocol and seek help, if O'Connell hadn't been close enough, hadn't followed Ragnar's desperate lead back through that confusing maze of alleys and time, he wouldn't be sitting here now, watching the city blur past. He'd be another statistic, another name etched onto the memorial wall at headquarters. Ragnar sat alertly in the back seat of O'Connell's SUV, but his massive head was positioned firmly between the two front seats, his warm breath puffing against Marcus's ear, his concerned amber eyes never leaving his handler's profile. When they finally pulled up to the curb in front of Marcus's modest brick bungalow in a quiet residential neighborhood, O'Connell shifted the car into park, cutting the engine. He turned to Marcus, his usual jovial demeanor subdued. "You good, man? Seriously?" Marcus took a slow, deep breath, gathering himself. "Yeah," he said, trying to convince himself as much as O'Connell. "Yeah, I'm good." The house looked exactly the same as he'd left it that fateful evening. Trim lawn needing a mow, familiar chipped paint on the porch railing. Yet something about it felt different, altered by his near-death experience. He felt different. He stepped out of the car, his legs still feeling slightly stiff and unreliable. But Ragnar was instantly at his side, pressing close, matching his pace up the short walkway. As soon as Marcus unlocked and opened the front door, Ragnar surged past him, exhibiting trained behavior mixed with instinct. He swept through the lower floor of the house systematically, nose working overtime, sniffing every corner, every piece of furniture, clearing the space, checking for any potential danger or unfamiliar scents. Satisfied after a thorough circuit, he trotted back to Marcus, who stood just inside the doorway, and let out a soft, contented huff, nudging his hand as if reporting, "All clear. It's safe. You're home." O'Connell leaned against the open door frame, watching the interaction with a fond smile. "You need anything before I take off? Groceries? Anything?" Marcus shook his head, feeling the comforting familiarity of his own space begin to seep in, easing some of the tension. "No, I think I just need some time to adjust, to just be." O'Connell nodded, understanding completely. "All right then, holler if you need anything at all, Marcus, day or night, seriously." He gave Ragnar a final pat. "Take care of him, buddy." With a final wave, O'Connell left, pulling the door closed gently behind him, and for the first time in weeks, Marcus was truly alone. Alone with Ragnar in the quiet sanctuary of his own home. He could finally breathe, fully and deeply, without the constant beeping of monitors or the smell of antiseptic. Ragnar nudged his leg again, grounding him. Marcus smiled, a genuine, weary smile, and slowly, carefully lowered himself to one knee on the worn entryway rug, wrapping his arms around his partner's thick, strong neck, burying his face in the familiar scent of his fur. "We made it home, buddy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We actually made it." Ragnar responded with a series of gentle licks to his cheek, his tail thumping softly against the floor. They were home. They were together. And for now, that was enough. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. Marcus dedicated himself to outpatient physical therapy with the same intensity he applied to his police work. Progress was steady but frustratingly slow. Regaining full strength, flexibility, and cardiovascular fitness after such a traumatic injury and major surgery was a grueling process. There were good days where he felt almost like his old self, pushing through exercises with determination. And there were bad days, plagued by pain, exhaustion, and the insidious whispers of self-doubt and lingering trauma. Nightmares still ambushed his sleep occasionally, vivid replays of the shooting, leaving him drenched in cold sweat, his heart pounding. Through it all, Ragnar remained his anchor. The dog seemed to have an uncanny ability to sense Marcus's mental state. On bad days, Ragnar wouldn't leave his side, offering silent comfort, a warm presence against which Marcus could lean. Literally and figuratively. He'd nudge Marcus's hand insistently until he was acknowledged, lick away tears Marcus didn't even realize he'd shed during a flashback, or simply lie with his heavy head on Marcus's lap, radiating calm. On good days, Ragnar seemed subtly more energetic, nudging his leash toward the door, encouraging Marcus to take longer walks, gently pushing him to engage with the world again. Their walks gradually increased in length and intensity, rebuilding Marcus's stamina and reinforcing their bond with every shared mile. Finally, after nearly 3 months of rigorous recovery and therapy, Marcus received the official clearance he'd been working towards. Dr. Ramirez and the department psychologist both signed off. Physically capable, mentally sound, fit for full duty. The morning he was scheduled to return, Marcus stood before the mirror in his bedroom, meticulously putting on his uniform. It felt both familiar and strangely foreign after the long hiatus. Each piece, the crisp shirt, the heavy vest that had partially saved his life, the polished badge, felt imbued with new weight, new significance. He adjusted his belt, the weight of his holstered sidearm settling comfortingly on his hip. He looked different, he knew. The physical scars were healing, fading, but the experience had inevitably changed him in ways that weren't visible. He felt older, perhaps wiser, certainly more appreciative of every breath. Ragnar sat patiently on the floor, watching his handler's ritual with quiet intensity, his tail giving an occasional, expectant thump. He knew the uniform. He knew the routine. They were going back to work. Marcus looked down at his partner, meeting those intelligent amber eyes. He knelt, scratching behind Ragnar's ears. "Ready to get back out there, partner?" he asked softly. "Ready to go to work." Ragnar responded with a low, eager whine and a definitive, enthusiastic tail wag, his entire body radiating readiness. His answer was clear. "Always ready with you." As they stepped through the familiar doors of the precinct building later that morning, a ripple of respectful silence fell over the usually bustling main floor, followed by a spontaneous eruption of applause. Officers turned from their desks, detectives paused their conversations, administrative staff looked up from their paperwork. Nods of respect, genuine smiles, welcoming calls of, "Good to see you back, Belle," echoed through the room. Marcus felt a lump form in his throat, taken aback by the warmth of the welcome. He nodded his acknowledgments, feeling Ragnar press reassuringly against his leg. He was back where he belonged, among his tribe, his brothers and sisters in blue. And with Ragnar steadfastly by his side, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet confidence settling over him. The road back had been long and arduous, but they had navigated it together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them the same way, unstoppable.